Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In order to stay within the realm of what is appropriate, to stay within the realm of right as opposed to entering into what is wrong, we need to be positive. We have to be able to rid ourselves of negative influences. And we have to be able to maintain, at the very least, an equilibrium where we accept what's going on as opposed to constantly being in a struggle with what's going on. Some things we need to understand. The mind is a constant, and the mind doesn't stop, doesn't cease, and continues to give us critique and information. Now, there are different levels that the mind works on and that the mind critiques. And let's go through some of this. While we are in the lower levels of consciousness, everything is about me. We're in the egocentric self, and we are basically studying ourselves and watching out for ourselves and taking care of ourselves and worried about ourselves. In Islam, they call this the nefs, or the lower self. The lower self are the animal qualities, and the animal qualities are at the lower levels of consciousness. This is when everything is done to me and I have to react. Imagine an animal in its circumstances. It's constantly on the lookout for its own protection. It's constantly on the lookout to try and maintain its life because it's a hunt and be hunted society. Man can place himself in those same circumstances, or he can attempt to transcend those circumstances. Now, as long as he is within those animal circumstances, his mind is going to be very, very active. As we bring ourselves out of our I, me, mine situation and begin to understand that there's more to existence than ourselves, our consciousness begins to elevate. And the mind doesn't have as much control as it had when we were in the I, me, mine status of consciousness, where everything is being done to me or everything is being done by me. So things are done to me and I react. Things are done to me and I react. Things are done to me and I react. In that state where things are done to me and I react, you are constantly using your mind. And your mind is constantly running you. Now, mind has an attachment to the elemental, illusory world. That's what it works in. It is elemental and it reacts to the elements. The elements being the entire world that we see, our senses, everything that we interact with on the level of senses happens through the mind. And the mind considers itself to be who we are. And we fall into the trap of aligning ourselves with our mind. So we also begin to get into a situation where we believe that our thoughts are who we are. And as long as we believe that our thoughts are who we cannot leave the influence of the mind. We can't detach ourselves from it because it's us. And whenever we hear it, we react to it because it's us. As we stay in the negative qualities and think about them, jealousy, anger, hatred, these qualities are usually about a disputation between ourselves and someone else. These qualities usually involve our interaction with others where there is trauma, where there is difficulty, where there is war, where there is a dispute, where we are trying to resolve it through the worldly means that we have in our control. So, if we're jealous, we try to grasp more. If we hate, we try to cause harm. If we're angry, we try to push things in a way that we change circumstances. So we're in an active state reacting to things that come into our purview. And this is what the mind does. It reacts. If we're going to go to a level where the mind doesn't influence us, we have to get above the animal qualities. We have to get outside of animal reactions and animal qualities. We have to leave those qualities and become someone who reacts differently than one who reacts at an animal state. A real simple example is Jesus said, if someone strikes you, turn the other cheek. Now, an animal will never do that. An animal, if you strike him, will bite or strike you back. It certainly won't turn the other cheek. It may run, but it won't turn the other cheek because it can't accept that kind of behavior. It can't transcend that kind of behavior. So, can we transcend the behavior that is pushed upon us? Are we capable of accepting outrageous behavior directed at us without reacting? Are we capable of accepting outrageous behavior directed at us without bringing about a reaction of outrageous behavior in return? Are we capable of doing this? Well, this depends on how strong our mind is and how we are able to transcend the influence of the mind. And what happens to us in our consciousness that allows us to transcend the influence of the mind, which is in a tit-for-tat situation, which is in a constant situation where you give and I give back, or you do something and I do back. We have to enter into other states, higher vibratory states of being. So when we begin to understand that everything that goes on in this world isn't personal, and everything that's being done isn't being done to me, we begin to change. Take traffic, for instance. If somebody cuts you off, do you really think they're cutting you off? Or that's just what they do? Is it personal or is it beyond personal? Do you understand that it has nothing to do with you? If people understood that in traffic it wasn't personal, you wouldn't have all the road rage that you have. But people can't seem to get out of that mindset that these things are personal. And this goes through everything. Traffic is only one example. However, if we can enter into higher vibratory states where we ourselves have entered into a state of loving kindness, of loving consciousness, of love wherein we accept what's going on, and we know that we have been created out of love, and we understand that it is within us to be able to love at every moment, no matter what the circumstances we're in. Our consciousness changes. And when we're in a state of love, our mind has a different effect on us than when we're not in a state of love. When we're holding a baby and the baby urinates on us, we don't get angry. Why? Because the baby's so lovable and we're in love with the baby. So we don't react in an angry way because we understand that the baby can't control itself. Well, guess what? Most people are at the state where they can't control themselves. Most people are at the state where they do things out of reaction automatically and can't control what they're doing. Now, you can enter into that game with them and get involved in a screaming argument or in a dispute or even something more violent than that, or you can walk away, turn the other cheek, forget about it, or act somehow differently, or tell them, I'm sorry you feel this way, I love you. I had a friend of mine come and ask me for some advice, and he was having trouble with his business partners, and they were blaming him for all kinds of things. And he asked me what to tell them and how to react to them, because they were a family and it was a family business. And I said, tell them all that you love them. And no matter what happens here, you're going to continue to love them. And whatever they do to you, you forgive them. And your affection for them doesn't cease. And he told me he did this, and after he did it, they all became very confused and they didn't know how to talk to him anymore, and they sort of dropped the subject and stopped attacking him because it wasn't going anywhere and they weren't getting the kinds of reactions they wanted. Well, we shouldn't be giving people the kind of reactions they want. We shouldn't be engaging in tit for tat. We shouldn't be engaging in retribution. We shouldn't be engaging in vengeance. We shouldn't be engaging in creating situations that are difficult. We should be the ones that bring love into the equation. And when we do that, something happens to us that is of great benefit to us. And that's what we need to understand, because in the bottom line, it's all about who you are becoming and who you are being. And when you're able to bring love into situations, that means that you are resonating from a different place than you resonate from if you're bringing retribution into the situation, if you're bringing vengeance into the situation, animosity or hatred or any of the negative qualities. So why do we need not to be negative? Because if we're negative, we are dealing with the lower levels of vibrations, and we're dealing with the lower levels of qualities, and we're not dealing with God's qualities. We're not dealing with truth. We're dealing with the illusion of this world. We're dealing with Satan's influences. And Satan's influences work through us, through our mind and desire. To leave our mind and desire, we have to leave Satan's influences. We have to leave negative thoughts. We have to leave negative emotions. We have to leave negative influences. As we leave negative influences, we are able to love more. And if you're under the influence of your mind, and you think your mind is taking you places you don't want to go, that's an indication that your vibratory nature at that time is low, and that you're not in a state of love. And you need to do something to elevate yourself into a state of love. You need to remove yourself from the negativity that you've been involved in and the negativity that you're feeling. And this will help you escape the influence of your mind. But it all has to do with your state of consciousness. And it all goes hand in hand. It's all a big part of the larger picture. There has to be transcendence of certain qualities in order to gain other qualities. You can't be angry and love at the same time. You can't be vengeful and be transcendent at the same time. Vengeance doesn't allow transcendence. Hatred doesn't allow transcendence. Gossip doesn't allow transcendence. All of the negative qualities do not allow you to be transcendent. So what is it that you're doing when you get involved in retribution with other people? You're repressing your own consciousness. You're hindering your own consciousness. You're stopping yourself from reaching higher levels of consciousness. So we not only don't hate so that we don't get involved with other people in hatred, we do it to help ourselves be able to transcend our own levels of consciousness and take us to higher levels of transcendence. And another thing that happens when this happens is this is what surrender is about. If you no longer think I'm doing or things are being done to me, but you surrender your will to God and you say, God is doing through me, and I'm watching this go on, and my own personal influence isn't that great on what's actually going on, because this is part of God's plan, and I've given up my plans for God's plan. We begin to transcend. because we release ourselves from praise and blame. We release ourselves from fault. We release ourselves from the reaction that we have when things don't go the way we want them to go, because we've surrendered and we've accepted. So that takes us out of negative influences, and it allows us to get into positive influences and positive thinking. And as we climb this ladder of positivity, we become closer to things like joy and things like love and things like transcendence. But it takes understanding that the mind will only deal with the elemental and can't go to those places. When we think we're in charge, we can't go to those places. When we think we are the doer, we can't go to those places. When we think the world is personal and everything's being done to me by the outside, we can't go to those places. So we have to begin to institute attitudes that allow us to transcend into love, that allow us to be in a state of love, and that allow us to maintain that state of love. Now, I've said this often, consciousness is a sliding scale. We can be in a high state of love, and then we can fall. But when we fall, we have to remember that once we were not like this, and we can get back to where we were before. Now, the mind is always in the past or in the future. It is not now. And you should be conscious of that. So if you're not absolutely in the present, that means your mind is influencing your existence. And to get out of that influence, you have to bring yourself into the present. And what brings you into the present? Acceptance and love. Bring you into the now. What takes you out of the now? Any negative thought. Because what happens immediately is your mind goes into action as to how are you going to fix the situation that's negative? How are you going to somehow bring things about so they get back to the equilibrium that you want them to be in? In other words, acceptance is now out of the picture, and all that's in the picture is your own will. And as long as your own will is what's in the picture, your mind is going to be the major influence in your existence, and it is going to continue to direct you. And the mind can't transcend because the mind is elemental. So we all suffer from the mind. We all suffer from the influence of the mind. What we need to do is replace the influence of the mind with the influence of God, with the influence of Allah, with the influence of God's qualities. So instead of vengeance, we need gratitude. Instead of hatred, we need kindness. Instead of retribution, we need justice. We need God's qualities to be the qualities that guide our life. But this only happens when we surrender. This only happens when we no longer believe that we are the main actor in this play, that God is guiding us through this play, that things are done through us. When all of that happens, when all of that occurs, then we begin to change. Now, the question that always comes up, and we need to be able to look at this closely and constantly is what's more important to us. Is the world looking the way we want it to look more important to us? Or is our relationship with the qualities that belong to God more important to us? So, is it more important to us to be in a state of love or to be wealthy? Is it more important to us to be in a state of love or to be famous? Is it more important to us to have power or to be in a state of love? Bawa, our teacher, would often say, I am the lowest, most discarded thing in the universe. He wasn't interested in power. He wasn't interested in wealth. He wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't interested in anything except his relationship to the truth and his relationship to God. You see, Sufism is not a part-time job. Sufism isn't something that you can turn on and turn off. Sufism isn't from 10 to 2 and then you go back to your life, because every time you turn it off, you have to climb back up the ladder. It's like chutes and ladders. You slide down and come back up. And if you turn it off, you do a lot of sliding. And if you allow yourself to slide, the effort to get back up can be great and can be difficult. So imagine that this, in fact, is your major work, to be able to be in a state of love. This is the major part of your existence, to be able to bring yourself into a state of love, into a state of kindness, into a state of a representative of God, into a state of one who walks with his qualities. If we can understand that, then we will begin to change, and then the influence of the whisperer, who is constantly talking into our ear and traveling through our mind, will become less and less and less. Love does not react in a negative way. Love always reacts with kindness. And when we understand that, then we become ones who begin to travel the road towards transcendence, where we become above this world of illusion, above this animal world, and we're able to get on the boat that sails over this ocean of illusion, and we're protected from it. That should be our path. That should be our goal. That should be the way that we move forward. And one of the things that we need to do this is we need to meditate. We need to be able to contemplate love, think about love, imagine moments of love in our existence, bring them to the forefront of our consciousness, and feel what they're like. Feel those moments of elevation that we've had in our life and make them now. Bring them into the now. We also need to pray directly to our Lord. We need to enter into a dialogue with our Lord where we tell him what we are lacking and what we need in order to enter into the space that has been reserved for us, that space of love, that space of kindness, that space of integration with his qualities. Oh Lord, I have not always done that which is correct. I ask you to forgive me, and I ask you to cleanse me of all of those things that have held me back from entering into your qualities. I ask you to relieve me of all of those qualities that keep me from understanding love and understanding kindness and understanding transcendence. I ask you to take me from this animal world into the world of holiness, into the world where I do your will, where I have given up my will and my self motive for your will, because your will is the only true will in all of existence, and I understand that now. But I need to integrate with that. I need to become at one with that. I need your guidance. I need you to take me in that direction. We need to be able to have this kind of dialogue with our Lord. And it has to be direct, and it has to be from the deepest parts of us. And if we can do all this, then the straight path will be our path, and the path towards him will be the path that we're on. May it be so for each of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen.